The first bullet whistled past my ear like a vengeful wind, shattering the silence of the snowy canyon. I dropped instinctively behind the jagged rocks, my chest heaving, breath frosting in the bitter mountain air. Someone or something was hunting me, and judging by the deliberate aim, they weren't missing by accident. I had been following the trail of the infamous outlaw gang, the Black Spurs, for nearly a month. Their hideout was rumored to be somewhere near the high peaks of the Sangre de Cristo mountains. But now, with my horse dead beneath me from the last avalanche and no way to outrun a gunman in this narrow canyon, survival came down to luck and skill. Then I saw her. She was crouched on the opposite ledge, wrapped in a tattered fur cloak that looked like it had survived decades of winters. Her dark hair cascaded past her shoulders in thick, tangled waves, and her eyes sharp, amber, unafraid, locked on mine. She didn't hesitate. With one fluid motion, she swung a rope around a nearby pine, leaping across the icy gap to my side. "You're not getting away," she said, her voice carrying authority yet curiosity. "But I can help if you trust me." I had no choice but to nod, bewildered by her audacity and the sudden, inexplicable sense of safety she inspired. She didn't wait for me to protest. With a few calculated moves, she helped me climb a sheer rock face that led to a hidden cavern. Invisible from the canyon floor. Inside, the cave smelled of smoke and pine resin. She lit a small lantern, revealing a tiny, rustic camp carved out of the rock. A stack of blankets, a few iron cooking pots, and an assortment of weapons lay neatly arranged. This woman, whose name she refused to give, was no ordinary mountain wanderer. "Why help me?" I asked, my voice low, tense. "You don't even know me." She shrugged, pulling her cloak tighter. "Because the Black Spurs killed my brother, and I've been waiting for someone who can finish what I started." Her eyes softened slightly, but there was a steel edge beneath the warmth. She introduced herself as Aiyana, an Apache woman who had chosen the mountains over the plains after her family was torn apart. Her knowledge of the terrain, survival skills, and tracking abilities were unmatched. "I've watched you," she said quietly, "since you first entered the pass. You have a stubborn streak that reminds me of him." She paused, her gaze lingering on me with something I couldn't define, a mix of respect and challenge. "But stubbornness can get you killed. You need me alive, and I need you alive. It's as simple as that." The wind howled outside, rattling the entrance of the cavern. I realized I had underestimated both the elements and the gang. The Black Spurs were relentless, and now we were on the same side of a fight neither of us could escape. Night fell with a strange stillness, only broken by the occasional echo of distant gunfire or a collapsing snowdrift. Aiyana shared her sparse rations with me, her movements precise, almost ceremonial. She had a habit of studying everything, the way I held my revolver, the way I wrapped my cloak, the tension in my shoulders. I wasn't sure if she was sizing me up or reading me like an open book. Finally, unable to stay silent, I asked, "Why didn't you leave these mountains? You could have joined another tribe or gone east. Why stay here?" Her jaw tightened. "Because vengeance doesn't wait for permission, and neither does justice." Something in her words struck me. She carried a burden, a history that made her fierce and unyielding. I sensed that behind those amber eyes was a story of loss, endurance, and survival that was far older than the snow-laden peaks surrounding us. Suddenly, a distant scream tore through the canyon, followed by the unmistakable clatter of hooves on ice. The Black Spurs were moving closer. I grabbed my gun instinctively, but Aiyana stopped me with a hand on my chest. "Don't," she whispered. "Not yet. Let me handle this." Before I could react, she vanished into the snowy night with the agility of a lynx. I could hear the faint whistle of arrows and the muffled shouts of men, and then silence. She returned moments later, coated in frost, eyes blazing. "They're scattered," she reported, catching her breath. But they know someone's alive. They'll come back. Tomorrow, we make our move or we die trying. I felt a strange mix of fear and admiration. She was wild, fearless, and undeniably skilled. Yet beneath that, there was a deep loneliness, a yearning for someone to share the fight with, someone who could understand without needing words. And somehow, I knew that I had been pulled into her orbit, whether I wanted it or not. That night, huddled together for warmth in the cavern, we shared stories. She spoke of her childhood on the plains, the day the cavalry arrived, and the betrayal that took her brother from her. I spoke of the Black Spurs, of my quest for justice, and the heavy guilt that had followed me from town to town. By the firelight, I realized the truth. Survival was no longer about me. It was about us. And if the Black Spurs thought they could destroy her alone, they were gravely mistaken. The wind outside screamed like a warning. The mountains were unforgiving, and the next day would demand everything we had: cunning, courage, and trust. And trust, I suspected, would be the hardest weapon to wield. Snowflakes fell silently, blanketing the abandoned mining town in an eerie white calm. Taha followed Aiyana's lead, his boots crunching through frost-hardened dirt and scattered wooden planks, each step echoing in the empty streets. The town's buildings were skeletal remnants of a forgotten boom-rotten wood, shattered windows and rusted signs creaking in the wind. Even in daylight, the place radiated an oppressive loneliness, as if the mountains themselves had exiled it. "Stay close," Aiyana whispered, her amber eyes scanning every shadow. Her movements were fluid and deliberate, betraying years of surviving in terrain far more treacherous than any man could endure. "They know someone's coming. I can feel it." Taha nodded, adjusting his coat and checking his revolver. He didn't know what unnerved him more, the snow or the silence. He had followed killers before, but this deserted town carried a different weight. A feeling that something unseen was already watching as they approached the central square. A faint scraping sound echoed from one of the boarded-up shops. Aiyana froze, crouching behind a toppled wagon. "Black Spurs," she murmured. "Two men, Cole and Silas. They're scouts." Taha held his breath. He had read about the Black Spurs' ruthlessness, but seeing them so close, knowing that his own survival depended on staying unseen, made his stomach knot. Aiyana slipped out first, her movements a shadow against the snow-dusted boards. Within moments, the two scouts were incapacitated, tied with rough rope, their guns confiscated. Taha watched silently, impressed and slightly unnerved. Her efficiency was terrifying. "They won't be leaving this town to warn the others," Aiyana said, her tone cold but precise. "Now we move fast. They'll think this is just another ghost story until it's too late." Taha nodded again. He wanted to ask questions, but the way she commanded the scene left no room for hesitation. Together they entered the main street, weaving through collapsed buildings and snow-drifted debris. The town's general store was the next target, where Aiyana believed the gang's ringleader Ethan had stashed weapons and supplies. As they entered, Taha felt a sudden shift in the air, a tension that raised goosebumps across his arms. Aiyana's hand went to his shoulder, stopping him mid-step. "They're expecting a fight," she warned. "But not from us." Inside the store, the smell of dust, rotting food, and old wood assaulted him. Shelves had toppled, glass bottles shattered on the floor. And there, in the corner, crouched the two men who had cornered him weeks ago, Jared and Ethan. Both turned at the sound of movement, their eyes narrowing when they saw Aiyana. "Who the hell are you?" Jared spat, stepping forward with a pistol raised. "I'm the reason your brother won't get revenge." Aiyana replied, her voice calm, almost serene. "Step aside, and you live. Try anything else, and you die." Taha moved slightly, hoping she wouldn't need to test that threat. But in one fluid motion, Aiyana drew her bow, an arrow already nocked and aimed with deadly precision. The movement was almost artistic, each step rehearsed and exact. Jared hesitated, and that hesitation was enough. "You move. You die," she repeated, and Taha realized she wasn't bluffing. Jared froze, raising his hands. Ethan, however, seemed different. He didn't fear her. His eyes were hard, calculating. "Funny," Ethan said, voice low and rough. "I've heard tales about the Apache girl who haunts the mountains. Didn't think I'd meet her in person." "I'm not here for stories," Aiyana said. "I'm here for the Black Spurs. You're in the way." Taha felt the weight of the moment. The abandoned store, the snow outside, the tension in the air. It was a standoff that could erupt at any second. Ethan's hand twitched near his holster, and Taha had to act fast. "Ethan," Taha called, stepping forward, voice firm. "Drop it. You're outnumbered and outmatched. Don't make this worse for yourself." Ethan's gaze flicked between Taha and Aiyana, and for a heartbeat, it seemed like he might obey. Then, without warning, he lunged toward the door, hoping to escape. Aiyana's arrow flew, striking the wall near his head. He froze, pressed against the doorframe. "That's your only warning," Aiyana said, eyes blazing. "Leave, or you'll join the others in the snow." Ethan swallowed hard, finally backing down. Taha exhaled, tension leaving him in a rush. The immediate threat was contained, but Aiyana wasn't satisfied. "They're scattered. But we can't stop now," she said. "Ethan is only the beginning. The gang's stronghold is deeper in the canyon, and they're waiting for reinforcements." Taha could see it in her eyes, the resolve that had driven her since her brother's death. There was no turning back. He felt a mix of awe and fear. He had come to the mountains seeking justice, but now he realized justice wasn't enough. He had found someone whose cause and courage demanded loyalty. The day passed with a tense search through the town. Aiyana tracked footprints through snowdrifts, checking every collapsed building, every hidden alcove. Taha tried to keep up, following her instincts as if guided by an unseen force. When they finally paused to rest in what remained of an old miner's cabin, Aiyana allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. "They'll come for us tonight," she said quietly, eyes scanning the dim light filtering through broken shutters. "The Black Spurs won't let me finish this alone. They'll send the others, maybe all of them. We have to be ready." Taha nodded. "Then we'll be ready. I won't let you face them alone." Aiyana's gaze softened briefly, but the hardness returned. "You think you understand this life, Taha," she said. "But you don't. Every choice is survival. Every mistake can be the last." He didn't answer. Instead, he prepared their defenses, blocking entrances, setting traps, arranging weapons within reach. He felt the weight of responsibility heavier than he had in years. This wasn't just about killing outlaws. It was about staying alive together, trusting each other in ways that neither of them had before. Night fell, thick and suffocating, cloaking the mining town in darkness. The wind carried a low moan through the broken structures, and Taha could hear the distant cries of wolves or perhaps men. He crouched beside Aiyana, keeping his back to hers as she silently scanned the shadows. Hours passed with a tension that was nearly unbearable. Then the first sound came, a faint crunch of boots on snow. Taha tensed, revolver ready. Aiyana's bow was already drawn, the arrow gleaming in the weak moonlight. Two figures emerged, silhouetted against the pale snow, Cole and Silas returning with reinforcements. The Black Spurs had underestimated Aiyana, and now they were paying the price. She didn't hesitate. The first arrow flew, striking Cole in the shoulder. He went down with a grunt. Silas tried to reach a weapon, but Taha was faster. knocking him to the ground with a swift, precise movement. By the time the rest of the gang arrived, it was too late. Aiyana and Taha had the high ground, every entry point defended, every trap sprung. The remaining men hesitated, seeing the bodies of their scouts and the deadly calm in Aiyana's stance. "You wanted me alive," she said, voice ringing out in the cold night. "Now watch closely. This ends tonight." The final confrontation was brutal but brief. Aiyana moved like a phantom, arrows flying with deadly precision. Taha covered her, shooting only when necessary, his movements efficient, controlled. By dawn, the mining town was silent again, the snow stained with evidence of the night's violence. Taha sank against the cabin wall, exhausted, covered in frost and grime. Aiyana knelt beside him, checking him for injuries, her hands gentle despite the blood and chaos surrounding them. "You did well," she said quietly, almost tenderly. "Better than I expected." He gave a weak smile. "We did well, together." Her amber eyes studied him for a long moment, and he sensed that beneath the warrior's exterior there was a flicker of trust. Not many survived the mountains, let alone the Black Spurs, but together they had died as the first pale light of dawn filtered through the broken windows. Taha realized something he hadn't before. Survival wasn't enough anymore. He wanted more. He wanted to stand with her, to fight beside her, to face whatever came next. And deep down, he knew the mountains had brought them together for a reason. They gathered what they could from the abandoned town ammo, supplies, a few treasured weapons, and prepared to follow the trail deeper into the canyon. The Black Spurs weren't finished, and neither were they. Aiyana and Taha stepped into the snow together, leaving the town behind. Each footstep carried purpose, every breath a vow. The mountains were unforgiving, and danger lurked around every corner, but they were no longer alone. And that, Taha realized, was a power neither of them could ignore. The canyon walls rose like jagged teeth, their icy faces reflecting the pale light of a winter sun. Taha followed Aiyana's lead, her long, dark hair braided tightly against the cold wind, her eyes scanning the terrain as though she could read the stone itself. Every step through the narrow canyon path was precarious, the snow beneath their boots slippery, concealing loose rocks that could send them tumbling into the icy river below. "Keep your eyes open," Aiyana murmured. "They're smart. They know the terrain, and they'll use every advantage." Taha adjusted his coat and gripped his revolver tighter. He had never been so tense in his life. The events in the mining town were behind them, but the Black Spurs weren't finished. He could feel it in the air, the subtle echo of men moving. In the distance, the faint crunch of snow that didn't belong to the wind. As they rounded a sharp bend, they spotted movement ahead. Cole and Silas were waiting, crouched behind boulders, weapons ready. Aiyana signaled Taha to stop. They were outnumbered and outgunned if they charged recklessly. "Let me handle them," she whispered. Taha nodded, watching in awe as she pulled arrows from her quiver, knocking one with a fluid precision that spoke of years surviving in unforgiving lands. The first arrow struck Cole in the shoulder before he could raise his gun. Silas moved to retaliate, but Taha was already on him, tackling him to the ground. Snow sprayed in every direction as they struggled, but Taha managed to pin Silas, twisting the man's wrist until the pistol clattered to the rocks. Aiyana dispatched Cole with another arrow, her expression as calm as if she were performing a ritual she had done 1,000 times. "Quickly," she urged, "the others will be coming." They pressed deeper into the canyon, moving as shadows among the icy cliffs. Taha noticed the way Aiyana's eyes flicked constantly, calculating, predicting, reading the subtle shifts in snow and stone. There was a rhythm to her movements, a blend of instinct and experience that left him in awe. As night fell, they discovered a hidden alcove in the canyon walls, a small natural cave barely visible from the main path. Inside, the air was slightly warmer and a small fire flickered as Aiyana quickly set up a defensive perimeter. "We'll rest here," she said, scanning the entrance. "The Black Spurs think they know these canyons, but I've lived in these mountains longer than any of them have breathed." Taha sat down, still catching his breath. "How did you learn all of this?" he asked quietly. Aiyana's gaze softened briefly, the amber firelight dancing in her eyes. "My brother taught me. He was the best tracker I've ever known. I learned from him, and now I survive for him." Taha looked away, suddenly aware of the weight of her loss and the quiet ferocity that drove her. He had faced danger many times, but nothing had prepared him for the depth of resolve he saw in her. The sound came suddenly, a distant whistle, faint but deliberate. Taha tensed, recognizing it as a signal. "Ethan," he murmured. "He's calling them." Aiyana nodded, her face hardening. "Then we'll have company soon. We can't wait until morning. They'll try to flank us through the canyon walls. We need a plan." Together, they set traps and barricades, using the jagged rocks and icy ledges to their advantage. Taha placed sharpened stakes where the snow hid the drop-offs, while Aiyana created tripwires and subtle alarms using loose stones. Every step, every movement, was calculated to give them the upper hand. Hours passed, the cold pressing in on them, until the first group of men appeared at the mouth of the canyon. Ethan led them, flanked by Jared and a few other gang members. They moved carefully, scanning the shadows, unaware that Aiyana and Taha were waiting for them. The first arrow flew before anyone could react, striking Jared in the leg. Chaos erupted as the rest scrambled, but Taha was ready, his revolver precise, his movements sharp and controlled. The snow erupted in a storm of flying bodies, snow, and blood. Ethan roared, furious, but Aiyana was faster. She darted from rock to rock, arrows finding their mark with ruthless efficiency. Taha covered her, shooting only when necessary each. Actions synchronized as if they were two parts of a single machine. For a moment, it seemed the canyon itself was alive with the struggle snow cascading from the cliffs, the wind howling like a living creature, and echoes of gunfire and shouts bouncing between the walls. Taha felt his heart pounding, but beneath the fear, there was a strange exhilaration. He and Aiyana were a force unstoppable together. When the battle finally ended, the canyon was quiet again, the Black Spurs scattered or incapacitated. Ethan lay against a boulder, clutching his shoulder where an arrow had struck. He glared at Aiyana, fury and disbelief in equal measure. "This isn't over," he growled, his voice low and dangerous. Aiyana's amber eyes didn't waver. "It is over for tonight," she replied, "and next time it won't be mercy keeping you alive." Taha approached her, brushing snow from his coat. "Are you okay?" he asked, voice tinged with concern. She nodded, but there was a tension in her jaw. "I'm fine. But they'll regroup. We can't stay here. We have to move before dawn." The next morning, they packed what supplies they could salvage and continued deeper into the canyon. The path narrowed, and the walls seemed to close in, but Aiyana moved with ease, her eyes constantly scanning for ambushes or hidden threats. Taha tried to match her pace, but he realized that no training or experience could prepare him for her instinctive mastery of the terrain. As they reached a particularly narrow pass, Taha noticed a faint shimmer along the rocks, a hidden rope bridge swaying precariously over a deep crevasse. "That looks dangerous," he muttered. Aiyana smirked. "Danger is relative. Follow my lead." One by one, they crossed, Aiyana testing each step before Taha followed. Midway across, a shout rang out. Ethan, alive, had returned with reinforcements. The bridge creaked under the weight of their pursuit, snow spraying as men scrambled onto the swaying planks. "Go!" Aiyana yelled, knocking an arrow. "Move!" The tension was unbearable. Taha could feel the bridge shifting beneath him, the icy wind threatening to knock them off balance. But Aiyana was steady, her arrows finding targets with unerring accuracy. Ethan's men fell one by one, the rest retreating under the relentless assault. When they finally reached solid ground, both were panting, clothes soaked in sweat and snow. They looked back at the ravine, now quiet, the threat temporarily eliminated. Aiyana's expression softened, just for a moment. "You're strong, Taha. Stronger than I thought." He met her gaze, feeling a connection deeper than words could convey. "Not without you." They continued their journey, following the hidden canyon paths that only someone like Aiyana could know. Along the way, she shared fragments of her past, how her brother had taught her to read the mountains, to survive alone, and to trust only those who prove themselves. Taha listened, absorbing every word, realizing that her strength was built on a lifetime of loss and determination. By the time night fell again, they reached a hidden settlement carved into the canyon walls. Fires burned in small hearths, and the scent of cooking meat mingled with pine smoke. The settlement was a secret haven for those who had fled the chaos of the plains, a place where Aiyana had allies and safe passage. As they entered, the residents, mostly rugged men and women skilled in survival and combat, greeted her with respect. Taha felt a strange sense of awe. Aiyana was more than a fighter. She was a leader, a force that drew people to her cause. "We'll rest here," she said quietly. "We've earned it, but only for a night. Tomorrow we strike at the heart of the Black Spurs, and this time it ends." Taha nodded, feeling a rare peace amid the tension. For the first time, he understood that the fight wasn't just about revenge or survival. It was about justice, loyalty, and a bond forged in the harshest of conditions. As they prepared to rest, Taha realized he didn't just want to survive with Aiyana, he wanted to stand beside her, face whatever came next, and see the mountains through her eyes. And deep down, he knew that whatever danger awaited, together they were unstoppable. The fire crackled, the snow fell silently outside, and for a brief moment, the canyon felt safe. But both knew that safety was fleeting. Tomorrow, the final confrontation awaited, and neither would back down. The hidden settlement was quiet before dawn, the snow outside reflecting the first pale light of morning. Taha and Aiyana prepared themselves with meticulous care, checking weapons, adjusting coats, and silently reviewing their plan. Tonight would be the final confrontation with the Black Spurs. There was no room for mistakes, no margin for hesitation. Aiyana looked at Taha, amber eyes steady and unwavering. "We move at first light. Ethan and the others think they control the canyon, but they don't know its secrets like we do." Taha nodded, gripping his revolver. He had fought alongside her through snow, ice, and mountain passes, and he had learned that nothing about Aiyana was ordinary. She was fearless, cunning, and precise, a warrior molded by loss and survival. He felt a fierce loyalty to her that had grown beyond respect. It was something deeper, something unspoken. By midday, the last preparations were made. The settlers, loyal to Aiyana, took positions at strategic points along the canyon cliffs and hidden alcoves, ready to assist in the strike. Taha and Aiyana led the way, moving silently through the frozen terrain. Every crunch of snow beneath their boots was calculated, every shadow observed. The air was sharp, cold enough to sting exposed skin, but neither of them faltered. As they reached a narrow pass, Taha spotted movement ahead. Ethan, flanked by Cole, Silas, and Jared, emerged from a concealed hollow, weapons ready. The Black Spurs had grown bold, underestimating the forces aligned against them. "This ends today," Aiyana whispered. Her hand rested on the bow slung across her back. Taha felt the tension coil in his chest, his heart pounding in rhythm with hers. The battle began before anyone could speak. Aiyana moved like a shadow, her arrows striking with deadly accuracy. Ethan ducked behind a boulder, shouting commands that were drowned out by the cacophony of gunfire and snow-crunching combat. Taha covered her flank, shooting with precision. Taking down Silas as he tried to charge from the side, Cole lunged at Aiyana, but she twisted, pulling a hunting knife from her belt and striking with lethal precision. Taha moved to intercept Jared, tackling him into a snowdrift and forcing the man to drop his revolver. Every move was survival, every action a dance with death. Ethan roared in frustration, circling to flank them, but Taha anticipated the move. He fired twice, grazing Ethan's shoulder. The pain slowed the man, but his fury only intensified. He charged anyway, a reckless force of anger and desperation. Aiyana didn't hesitate. She nocked an arrow, aimed for the exact spot to stop him, and released. The arrow struck true, halting Ethan's charge just long enough for Taha to tackle him to the ground. The canyon echoed with shouts, gunfire, and the thud of bodies meeting snow. It was chaos, but Taha and Aiyana moved with a rhythm that no one else could match. Allies from the settlement appeared, covering the flanks, blocking escape routes, and herding the remaining gang members into disadvantageous positions. Finally, the battle reached a moment of pause. Ethan, Cole, Silas, and Jared lay scattered, some injured, some too shocked to move. Aiyana stood in the center of the pass, bow at the ready, snow clinging to her hair and clothes, her amber eyes blazing like fire against the cold white canyon. "Enough," she called, her voice carrying across the canyon. "You've lost. There's no escape." Ethan struggled to rise, rage and disbelief contorting his features. "You can't do this alone," he spat. "You?" Aiyana stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. "I've never been alone." "And neither are we," she said, glancing at Taha, who nodded. There was no doubt, no hesitation, only the quiet strength of two people who had survived the impossible together. Taha approached Ethan, revolver lowered but ready. "It's over," he said, voice calm but firm. "Any more resistance ends badly for you." Ethan looked between Taha and Aiyana, realizing the truth of it. He was outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and outmatched. Slowly, he sank to his knees, defeated. Cole, Silas, and Jared followed suit, groaning with pain and humiliation. Aiyana lowered her bow, allowing the tension in her shoulders to ease just slightly. She didn't smile, not yet, but the faintest flicker of relief passed through her eyes. Taha stepped closer to her, brushing snow from his coat, his own breath ragged from the fight. "You were incredible," he said quietly. "I've never seen anyone move like that." Aiyana studied him for a moment, her gaze softening. "And you fought well," she admitted, almost reluctantly. "Better than I expected?" They helped each other move the incapacitated gang members, tying them with rope and ensuring they couldn't escape. The settlement members watched silently, respect evident in their eyes. Aiyana had earned their loyalty through action and courage, and now Taha understood why. She was a force, but also a protector, someone who fought not just for vengeance but for justice and survival. As the last of the Black Spurs were secured, the canyon grew still again. Snow fell gently, covering the tracks and evidence of the battle. Aiyana and Taha stood side by side, surveying the scene. "It's finally over," Taha said, exhaling a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Not just yet," Aiyana replied, her voice quiet but firm. "We need to ensure they face justice, not just survive. They'll answer for their crimes beyond this canyon." Taha nodded. "Then we do it together." They gathered what remained of their supplies and prepared to escort the prisoners to a nearby town, ensuring the Black Spurs would face trial and punishment. The journey was slow and cautious, but for the first time in weeks, Taha felt a sense of purpose beyond survival. He had found someone he could trust, someone whose presence made him stronger, braver, and more determined than he had ever been. Along the way, Aiyana shared fragments of her past with him, the hardships, the loss of her family, and the lessons from her brother. Taha listened, realizing that her strength came not just from skill but from the pain she had endured and the choices she had made. He shared pieces of himself as well, speaking of the guilt and loneliness that had followed him through towns and trails. In the sharing, they found a bond deeper than words, built on trust, respect, and shared hardship. By the time they reached the town where the prisoners could be handed over, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold. The townspeople watched with wary curiosity as Aiyana and Taha arrived, escorting the Black Spurs into custody. Sheriff and deputies took over, ensuring the gang would face justice. Aiyana turned to Taha, her expression unreadable for a moment. "I could leave now," she said, almost casually, "return to the mountains, continue alone." Taha felt his chest tighten. "And I could let you," he said, voice low. "But I don't want to. Not now. Not ever." She studied him, amber eyes searching, and then something broke in her expression, a faint, genuine smile. "I suppose having someone who can keep up isn't so bad," she admitted, almost teasingly. He grinned, feeling a rare lightness in his chest. "I think we make a good team," he said. They walked through the town together, the snow crunching beneath their boots, the mountains rising in the distance like silent witnesses. The journey had been long, perilous, and filled with death and danger. But it had forged something stronger than either of them could have anticipated. In the quiet of the night, as the town settled and the fires burned low, Taha realized that his life had changed forever. He had found a partner, a friend, and perhaps something deeper, a connection that went beyond survival, beyond vengeance. Aiyana, the Apache woman with fire in her eyes and a warrior's heart, had claimed more than his loyalty. She had claimed a part of his soul, and she wouldn't let him leave. But Taha didn't want to leave. Not ever. Together, they watched the snow fall outside the window of the small inn where they rested, the mountains looming silently in the distance. The Black Spurs were gone, the immediate danger neutralized, and for the first time, both could breathe, knowing that the fight had ended not just for survival, but for justice, for honor, and for the bond they had forged. The mountains, the canyon, and the snow had tested them in ways unimaginable. But in the end, Taha and Aiyana had emerged stronger, united not by fate alone, but by choice. The world was vast and dangerous, but they would face it together. As the fire crackled and the wind howled softly outside, Taha took Aiyana's hand, feeling the warmth of her strength against the cold night. For the first time in years, he felt hope, trust, and a sense of belonging. And in the quiet of that snowy town, surrounded by the remnants of danger and the echo of their battles, they knew one truth above all: some connections are unbreakable, and some bonds are forged in fire, blood, and snow. They were survivors, warriors, and now something more. Together, nothing could stop them. The mountains had tested them. The Black Spurs had fallen, and Aiyana had chosen to keep Taha by her side. There was no loose end, no unfinished business. Only the future open, uncertain, but theirs to face together.